Oh, we cannot wait for La Liga to be back and Barcelona to be back in action. Well, that was Barca before the international break, putting 4 past Celta Vigo. And then last night, Hansi Flick and Lamine Yamal picked up the Coach and Player of the Year at the Marca Awards. And Flick said, if we play like in Vigo, then everything will be fine. Interesting that he says that. Anyways, at his presser today, Flick confirmed that Joan Garcia will start in goal for their upcoming game against Athletic Club de Bilbao. Pedri will miss out. Marcus Rashford will likely miss out, but Rafinha will be in the squad for the first time in almost 2 months, and he thinks Lamine Yamal is also able to play. Remember, Barcelona will be playing at the Camp Nou for the first time since May 2023. That is going to be an unbelievable atmosphere. All right, at this point, La Liga is back, so we have to welcome in one of our trusty La Liga reporters, Alex Kirkland, who is joining us right now from Spain. Alex, there's a lot in there to go through, especially the fact that he said if they just play like they played against Celta Vigo, everything should be fine.
Yeah, and look, Barca, I think the feeling around Barca, considering it's not that long ago that they lost the Clásico, the feeling's pretty good right now. You know, it felt like at the end of that last block before the international break, they were on a kind of an upward trajectory. The team's starting to come together. They've had a bit of a rocky start to the season, but things are looking better. They've got some key players coming back from injury. You mentioned Joan Garcia, still a few players out as well. The Camp Nou return this weekend is really significant because, yes, they've coped pretty well not being there, and they've been away a lot longer than they planned. Of course, the works have been delayed. There've been a few false steps along the way, but they're finally getting back home. That does make a difference. And like I say, they coped really well. You know, a great season last year. They won the league, but it's not the same as being at Camp Nou. It's a big deal for the club, not just symbolically, but also financially as well. The work is not done. The stadium is yet to be fully completed, but being back there with the fans is going to be really special. And yeah, Flick sounding pretty positive. And yeah, as you say, he said the way we ended up playing against Celta, if we can keep doing like that, we're going to be okay. And look, they're second in the table, just 3 points behind Real Madrid, despite that Clásico defeat not that long ago. So like I say, I think Barca are in a pretty good position right now.
Craig, you and I did that game.
There's been quite a lot of exciting international football since that game, and I think there's been a bit of a memory loss. Yeah, they won the game, and Lewandowski was looking sharp, and Rashford looked sharp down that left-hand side. But somebody's erased the first 45 minutes. Because that first 45 minutes, Stevie came in, we were doing the show that day, and you and I were working on it. And when he saw some of the defending again in the first half from that high line, it was crackers. It was just crackers, and Celta Vigo get in time and time and time again. And yeah, they outscored them in the end and they outplayed them in the end, but you're kind of papering over the cracks by saying if we keep doing that, we'll be okay. Maybe against most of the teams in La Liga, they will be, but as was shown in the Clásico and certainly some other games, there are some major defensive issues with what they're still trying to do, and it was still evident in the Vigo game, even though they won. So yeah, maybe it'll get better for them, but their defending in that game, to my memory, was just as bad as it's been for this season.
The key for them is probably not the back line, because the back line's not changing. It's the same chaos, probably more this year, because Martinez is gone than it was last year, but it's not changed. So really it's about the middle of the park. If they control the game and they have possession of the ball, then that back line doesn't come into play. When they turn the ball over, if they're not in good spots defensively, the midfield, that's when the trouble starts. And the back line has shown it's not capable of getting them out of trouble. It's just chaos. So for me, really, it's about the midfield. If they can dominate the game, and then when they do lose it, get somebody closing the ball down, then they'll be okay. But if they don't, and nobody closes the ball down, then it's just a toss of a coin what happens next.
And of course, any team missing Pedri and De Jong, you're going to have you're going to go down a notch or two in terms of performance, because those two at times can really just they can just take a game by the scruff of the neck, which they have done over the piece. So that, you look at the middle of that park, and that's something that Athletic Club maybe can make some hay with that midfield, to be honest with you. And there's not a lot of protection for the back four, so it's exciting to watch. I'll give you that if you're a neutral.
Yeah.
But you know, it's and as Stevie said, it's not changing anytime soon. It's just whether they can do it a little better than they've been doing it, because they haven't done it well enough this season.
Nedum, as a defender, I mean, to play in that system, knowing that there's not much protection for you in that back line, and just hearing your coach say, well, you know, if the forwards manage to do their job and the attacking players control that midfield, then everything should be fine. But you know, you're kind of just hoping for everyone to outscore opponents.
Yeah, I think from looking at it from that perspective, yes, that is an issue. Thankfully, you know, they have a pretty good attack, which they can probably trust to score some goals. But I think the way you've described it is key, and the fact that the manager is insisting that this is how it has to be. And I think if the manager says this is your job and you do it, you are then relying on other people to do theirs. And as the guys were saying, if maybe it's a bit too weak in midfield and they're not controlling those transitions well, if they're being sloppy on the ball, then it makes that job just that little bit harder. Because when we look at that offside, the offside lines that we see from Barca, at the start of last season, people were championing how many times they could catch a player offside. As I said before, they played in the Clásico and Kylian Mbappe was offside more than he was onside for that 90 minutes. But now teams are understanding how to play against it, understanding how to hit them in transition. And sometimes, if not all the time, you're seeing runners from deep and just seeing players slicing through Barcelona, and it feels like it's big chance after big chance after big chance that they're conceding. And I think for somebody who's experienced this flick, it's not necessarily about saying, well, we have to completely change who we are, but they have to refine it and try and get it back to the position to where it was a strength for them, you know, whether people are comfortable with it or not. But it was a strength at the start of last season. But again, if the manager says that's your job, then that's your job. You could question him, but this is his identity. And I guess for some players who don't like it, they're probably the ones who are on the sideline not doing it. But I think the job of the midfielders in front, the forwards in front of them, if you turn the ball over, try and win it back as quickly and as aggressively as possible, and then maybe people won't be running through on your goal literally a matter of seconds later.
I mean, it was successful for them last year, certainly domestically. There's no argument about that. But I think, you know, Real Madrid were not, even though it was slightly tight at the end, tighter than we thought it was going to be towards the end of the season. It went to the last Clásico. They were always really in control. You just feel maybe, you know, not a great side, but Real Madrid in a slightly better place than they were last year to take advantage of any slip-ups. And look, whether you can do it 2 years in a row with the old adage that Kevin Keegan had at Newcastle was if you score 3, we will score 4. But that bit them in the backside in the end, because Manchester United ground them down. They ground them down and ground them down, and they chased them and they got them, because they couldn't get the basics done in the end, because they were just trying to outplay everybody all the time. And as I say, that worked for them last year. But the sort of nature of the squad, certainly the defensive side of it, has changed this year. With Inigo Martinez going to Saudi Arabia, he was the organiser. They don't have that, and that's shown. That's shown. So it'll be interesting to see whether the kind of defending that we've seen from them can continue, and the results are positive, or whether it continues and there's going to be a downfall to their results. Only time will tell, because as everybody said, Hansi Flick, he's already made it clear this is the way they're going to do it, and they're not going to change.
All right, well, Barcelona in action tomorrow, and on Sunday, Alex, Real Madrid in action away at Elche. But we do know that they didn't go through this international break unscathed. Of course, we heard about the injury to Militao. What kind of a starting 11 can we expect from Xabi Alonso for this one?
This season, and he'll be missed, no question about that. There are doubts about a number of other players as well. Tchouaméni is back in training. Maybe this game comes too soon. He was expected not to be back for a couple more weeks. He might be back early. It would still be a surprise if he made it, and it means that Xabi Alonso's got to work things out in defence and in midfield. They've got enough players, because Dean Howson, who wasn't involved with Spain, we think he's going to be fit for this Elche game, so he probably comes in at centre-back. There might be a chance for Trent Alexander-Arnold at right-back, and that frees up Fede Valverde to move into centre midfield if Tchouaméni can't make it. They're also without Mascanzuono, who's got this groin problem. So a number of question marks. And Real Madrid, I mean, talk about the vibes around Barca being generally pretty good. It's a very strange situation in Madrid right now, because they're top of the table. They're league leaders, 3 points ahead of Barca, but at the same time, they feel like they're in, if not in crisis, then not that far away. Based on 2 games, basically, you had the Liverpool game in the Champions League, the defeat where they were poor. You had the draw away at Rayo, where they actually did okay. And I heard Thibaut Courtois this week saying that he thought they hadn't actually been too bad against Rayo, but it wasn't a great result anyway. Not a brilliant performance, certainly. And just 2 games, and there are some big questions about this Real Madrid team, and they're going now to an Elche side who are a really good team, play really ambitious, aggressive, attacking football, like to want to have the ball, want to go at teams, even against a team like Real Madrid. So it's a big test for Xabi Alonso's Madrid, no doubt.
Well, Alex, I want to talk about Jude Bellingham because, of course, he has come under some criticism in the headlines, mainly in the British papers after he was taken off by Thomas Tuchel in one of their international games. How is it being received in Spain?
Yeah, some of that, I think, with a slightly sort of quizzical, like not fully understanding why there's so much seeming controversy around Jude Bellingham in the English press, because it's not something that you see here. It's not something we've seen really generally reflected in his role in this Real Madrid team, which, there's never really been any question marks around, while they are seemingly with his place in the England team. Of course, he was out for the first couple of months of the season after that shoulder surgery. He's come back. Him coming back took a little bit longer than we thought. He was rushed back actually by Xabi Alonso a bit sooner than perhaps he should have. But before the international break, Bellingham was in really, really good form. I think he was something like 3 goals and an assist in 4 games or something like that, looking decisive, looking a lot happier than he had before that shoulder injury, moving with freedom for the first time in a year or two, and looking like the player, the feeling here was the player that he was in that first season, being decisive, scoring goals. Still some work to do in terms of exactly where he fits into this Real Madrid team, whether it's in a midfield 3, whether it's sort of playing behind the front 2. But like I say, all of that kind of the questioning of him and his place in the England setup, it's just not reflected here at all, because the only thing that Real Madrid have seen from him has really been positive, and the only absence was down to an injury, which with that surgery that was put off for so long and eventually came this summer. So yeah, I don't think people fully understand why he's questioned and why he's seemingly so controversial around the England team. And like I said, it's just not reflected here.
Yeah,
I'd imagine the Spanish don't give a hoot about what happens with the English, and this is sort of raised its head recently, and no player should be beyond criticism, but it's difficult for the media not to take a stance when the England manager is continually talking about a player, which Thomas Tuchel has. I mean, Thomas Tuchel's come out and said stupid things like "my mother is disgusted with Jude Bellingham" or words to that effect, and he's retracted that. He's come out and talked about the player's attitude. He's come out and talked about, leaving him out the squad. The England manager has talked incessantly about him, to be fair. So the media are going to pick up on that. And he is a big player. He is a world star. He is playing at one of the biggest clubs in the world. He is a talisman. He is expected, if he's playing well for Real Madrid, he'll be in the England team. But we know Jude Bellingham has, I'm not going to say, he has got an arrogance and a confidence about himself because he knows he's a good player. But when the England manager, and people can have an opinion, that's what people have, but when the England manager is constantly talking about you in the way that Tuchel has, that's not going to be ignored. And Ian Darke made that point the other day on the show. It's been driven to start with by the England manager himself, and then it's been picked up by others.
Nedum, what do you make of it all? And the fact that Thomas Tuchel has been the one that consistently has been keeping Jude in the headlines?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's probably disappointing from Tuchel to make it about one player in particular. But then I think as you look at that England squad, for as good as they are, I think he's the person, in my opinion, where if something's going on, there will be more clicks, people want to read more. And as a consequence, I think lots of journalists have jumped on that. And I think the fact that there's an element of negativity around it, they find it very easy to get people on board to agree that, yeah, this is the worst thing in the world. And I'll be honest, when I saw him kicking the dugout in the game the other day, I was disappointed. Not that he was unhappy, but I was disappointed he sort of showed it in that manner, because immediately he already knows that the manager's always fielding questions about him, and some of the media are very, very quick to pounce on him. I don't know him as a person, don't know if he's a good guy, bad guy, whatever, but within that England squad, I think he is the superstar. I think he is the one who will be spoken about more than any other. So anything he does will face a certain level of scrutiny, which others won't. So yes, I think he's probably, even though he's young, relatively speaking, he's got enough experience to know that's not necessarily the right thing to do in that moment. I think you can show your frustration towards a manager away from all the cameras, away from people who have an opinion about you, people who already have an opinion that now believe it. Here's the confirmation bias. Of course, he's a terrible person. He's terrible for this squad. He's so selfish, he's this, he's that. And people can be entitled to their opinion, but you don't necessarily need to play into it. But again, he is a star within that England side. And I think he knows that, and that level of sort of like arrogance that he can have on the pitch. I think if England to be successful, as crazy as it may sound, it'll be because of that, because he will see an opportunity which other people won't. He'll back himself in a situation where other people have doubt. But it's just a case, in my opinion, of trying to manage that. And I hope that he doesn't get completely torn down by the British press, like we've seen so many times before. Because I think, you know, the success of the nation is going to be very much on his shoulders at some point in the future.
It's funny how this would never have happened in a million years if Gareth Southgate was in charge. There was never any of this sort of nonsense going on when he was in charge. And 100% the manager has kicked this whole thing off. And unfortunately, when the press get a hold of it,
they'll run with it.
Fans, if they hear it long enough, loud enough, and often enough, all of a sudden it's true. I played with one of the greatest England players of all time, in John Barnes. And the press got a hold of him, and it was, well, he never plays well for England, he doesn't play the same way he does for Liverpool, and he ended up getting booed at home. I mean, just ridiculous. So Thomas Tuchel, if this thing just might keep rumbling on and on and on, because for somebody like John Barnes it did. And if it does for Jude Bellingham, not only will it affect Jude Bellingham, but it will affect the rest of the England team as well. So Thomas Tuchel's got a lot to answer for in terms of opening his mouth and starting all this with Jude Bellingham.
Nedum, do you agree? The fact that this would have never happened with Gareth Southgate?
Yeah, to be honest, I think I have to agree. I don't think Jude Bellingham has just started his England career under Thomas Tuchel. And I think in the past there were certain things which were being sort of levelled at Bellingham as such, but Southgate wasn't the one who was making it any worse. I think if anything, he was somebody who wanted to try and protect the players and put them in a space to where they could try and perform to their best. And don't get me wrong, like, it's not necessarily the perfect strategy as such, and maybe there were issues in particular at the last Euros when you start to hear little rumours of this happening, that happening, discontent within the camp. But ultimately, they try to keep things within the camp. I think sometimes it's not good for the person who's at the top of the tree and the manager almost criticising the player out in the open in a manner which is especially to do with somebody's, say, character, for example, because then people start to run with it, as the guys are saying. And when people run with it and fans listen to it, it's very easy to believe. And even though you've never seen it yourself, you believe it must be true because somebody wrote it. And not only did somebody write it, someone else discussed it and somebody agreed with it. So yeah, these are facts now. And you start to create this sort of narrative around a player who in some ways, you know, needs to support like other people. You know, he's still, as I say, relatively young. You know, he's imperfect, as is the case with pretty much everybody. But I think ultimately, like I say, the way that the British press can be at times, and it's not everybody, but it's enough people to make a difference. And as Stevie said, like, that's happened to John Barnes. You've seen it happen before with like Raheem Sterling and other people. And you sort of ask the question, well, why is it happening like this? And is it something that essentially they feel they need to do because it's just disappointing from that standpoint, because these are people who will do their best to represent their country and feel the most pride when they do it.